Guys, just a bit of housekeeping to start with as we discussed in the email. For those who have been on a Zoom clinic like this before, having all of our webcams on can be a little bit distracting, particularly for the people that are listening. So if you could all turn your webcams off, as well as mute yourselves, that would be much appreciated. And as we're going through this tonight, Judd has offered to answer questions as we go rather than have to wait for them at the end. So if you can send them through in the chat function just to me, and then I'll just be able to, when Judd has a break, I'll be able to pass on and essentially say, Kelly has a question for you, Judd, or something along those lines. As I mentioned in the email I sent out, we're going to try to have these fortnightly. Judd is the first one, so Judd's going to present about something I think is pretty beneficial for us as a program in terms of how, and these were his words, how the Davids compete with the Goliath, so how Southern Peninsula Association compete with the larger ones. That's coming from a point of view of how New Zealand's been able to compete with the world's best for a very long time. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Judd was actually part of the New Zealand national team that had the highest ever placing in a World Cup. So he's done as a player, and now he's part of it as a coaching staff, and not just international, but he was part of the New Zealand Breakers when they built up their dynasty in New Zealand. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Judd, who'll present. And as I said, if you have questions, please send them through to me in the chat function as we go, and when time permits, we'll pass on. Juddy, all yours, mate.
All right, cheers, Lucas. Thanks to the people for joining in. This is my first time doing this, so this is great practice for me, and this is kind of the shape of the landscape, I guess, that everybody's functioning with at the moment. So it's always good to learn new skills as we go along. I just want to firstly reiterate what Lucas said. If you guys do have questions, please fire them through, because nothing worse than sitting there listening to somebody talk for 30, 40 minutes, however long, and none of it is relevant to you or what have you. So please don't be shy. I mean, I want it to be as reciprocal as we can, so you get the full value out of it. And a lot of this is just obviously me sharing my story, my experience, what I've come across as a player, what I've experienced and learned as a coach. And some of it, I'm sure we'll touch with you guys, just being a smaller association, as Lucas has said. And, the first place that I really want to start is that, I guess, from being a New Zealander, the first thing is, I guess, we're a rugby nation, a nation that's sort of built on playing a game that's physical, that's just catch a ball and run straight and hard into the opposition as hard as you can. The bigger that you are, the more successful you can be. Well, fortunately for me, that was my body type, and I'm fortunate enough that I found the game of basketball and the love of that, and it's taken me to many places around the world. But the first point I guess I want to start off with is that even coming from a rugby nation, crazy, just how it is here and how Victorians love AFL. It's exactly the same way that New Zealanders feel about rugby. Any other sport is secondary behind that. So, even for us as a small country, we've taken great pride in just being firm believers in no matter which game we're coming into, which opposition we're coming up against, that we have every opportunity to win that particular game and to be successful on the international stage. There's always a first for everything. I think we had a time, 2001 was probably the start of our, I guess, honeymoon period, where we went and played Australia to qualify for the World Champs in 2002. This was the first time that we had beaten Australia in a series. Previously, it had only been achieved once before. I think, if memory serves me right, I think it was 1979 on a tip-in, game 2, New Zealand beats Australia in Wellington. Australia go on to, of course, win it in the third game, but that was the only time, 1979 until 2001 when we won the series 2-1. And I guess my point there is that we had sort of experienced 22 years of ass whipping, 22 years of losing to this green and gold war that we called Australia, and we were never going to get to the World Champs, Olympics, because of this immovable force. So that was a huge obstacle for us. Going on the next year, the following year, so we qualified for the World Champs. First time for us to be on the international stage, playing alongside superpowers and competing on the big global event. And we got everything right, and I'll explain as we go through this some of the key attributes and that fell in line for us, and we were able to get 4th place. It seems funny too, because if you had asked me 12 months prior to that we would have got fourth place, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But at the time when we lost that semi-final, I remember just how gutting and disappointed every single person in their team, from coaches to players, was, because we truly felt that we had it in us to make it to the final. Nevertheless, it's a huge, achievement for us, and something that we're very proud of. And I guess I start there because, like I said, it shows that, I guess, given the right mindset, given the right, you tap into the right aspects and attributes, that you can go ahead and achieve on the biggest stage. The first thing I would start with is just the values, I guess. Lucas had a couple of points that he wanted me to sort of touch on, but some of the values that makes up our Tall Blacks, and I'm going to speak a lot about the Tall Blacks program, but some of the values that we go from are really things that, I guess, describe or define us as a nation. And you think of New Zealand, much like Australia, very multicultural, different from the European heritage through to the Pacific Islands. We've got a taste of everything in there. But something that we really identify with is our Māori heritage, which is the native people there. I guess it's been a strong representation for us going forward. We have some of you, if you've watched the All Blacks, the rugby team play, they've made this, the haka, quite famous, because they do it before they perform. And it's something that we do as well as a basketball team, and a lot of other New Zealand sporting teams do it as well. And I think, we draw upon that. It's certainly in the culture. It's something that we take with us on the sporting field. It can be quite intense. And if you ask me, honestly, I think it's a huge advantage for us to be able to perform this, to perform it before the game. Not only are we getting the chance to take the spotlight off the opposition for a little bit, we're also getting ourselves one last G up, so to speak, or opportunity to really get ourselves going. And if you haven't seen it, but just something, sometimes it can look a little silly. That's me. Oh, actually, let me go back. I got to share my screen first. Sorry, rookie on this. So let me share this. So just show you. Yep, we got that.
Yep.
So this is obviously what I'm talking about. You look at Australia there, our formidable foes, and the New Zealand team, and this is in just about every sport ends up like this, with the Australians, standing right at the halfway line, and the New Zealand boys really getting into it, and some familiar faces there. And Shea Illy and Ruben Tarangi, who for the New Zealand All Blacks, and you look at Dave Anderson there and some of the other boys, and just like I said, I think it's a huge advantage for us, but something that we really tap into. Look, I think one of the things that get talked about a lot for us as New Zealanders is that, you know, we have a massive chip on our shoulder. It's something that I think we've tapped into over the years. Obviously, being the smaller brother to Big Australia, it has built a sporting rivalry over the years in many of the sports. You know, I talked about the basketball, how we struggled to get over that hurdle, but you know, we like to tap into that. We like to play the underdog card. I think it's, you know, I was just talking to one of the coaches here before about going up against Vic Metro, who probably are the, I guess, the favourites every time they come out on the floor in the age group champs. You know, and probably how everybody gets up for that one, because, you know, you're coming up against the big organisation, and everybody else is probably like, you know, little brother to them. So, you know, for us, one of the things that I guess has made us that way is obviously, you know, having those hurdles and having those great rivalry with Australia. One of the other things that I guess as a kid when you're growing up, you know, didn't always like Australia. You look at some of the things that I guess went along with the sporting environment. I'm not sure if anyone will remember this one. It's way too old. But go back to the cricket roots, where last ball of the game, and there was the underarm bowl, which is infamous now, and obviously, you know, I show that just to kind of share with you some of the things that we like to tap into as New Zealanders when we come up against Australia. But I think it's important to have that chip on the shoulder. For us, it's something that we're passionate about. It helps drive us on, and we're always looking to build respect wherever we go. So, you know, and yeah, even this talk about David and Goliath, it's not only just us versus Australia. Even within our own country, we've got our sport, which is just quickly growing. Participation numbers, I think, in the next 2 years or something like that, it's projected to be the #1 participated sport in the country of New Zealand, which is great, which is awesome. But some of the hurdles that we face there is just with our high performance funded. So, you know, the All Blacks, you know, we get, I think last year was $150,000 for the budget. That was for New Zealand basketball. That's All Blacks, Tall Ferns, which is the national women's team, all the age group teams, and yeah, all the organisation as well. So, you know, comparative to our netball counterparts, they get 1.2 million for a year. Field hockey gets 2.15 million. And basically equestrian, rowing, yachting, canoeing, they're all in the millions. So I think rowing might be our biggest recipients of $5 million. So basically, if you're in your country, if you're sitting down on something, you're going to get funded pretty well. Or if you're going backwards, we're pretty good at those sports. And you know, I guess it's just some of the struggles that we have internally on our with our sport. So, you know, to be able to achieve on the international stage is with that. We don't like to use that as any excuse, but you know, it somewhat does make a huge difference when you come up against some of the other powers in the world. I think I've got a video here. Oh, let me share this. This was something that talked about in terms of having that rivalry with Australia. And some of those games, I talked about rugby. You know, Australia's a very good rugby country as well, but you know, these are fairly haven't seen a game like this in a while, but some of the rivalry and some of the competitiveness can boil over somewhat. But I guess this is two countries that are very competitive and talk about chip on your shoulder and looking for anything to try to find something to tap into. I mean, that was us as a country. Yeah, so some of the key attributes that you know, we really value as the Tall Blacks, and I guess it's the same with every team, every coach. Look, you're trying to find what it is that you guys really do really well, and you're trying to tap into that as much as possible. And that's going to look different, you know, from country to country, from region to region, from team to team. And you know, for us, having that strong identity or that strong sense of knowing who we are is so important, because, you know, we play a particular style that's unique to us. And I think if you go along to the teams, you look at the Asian teams, and the first time I played against the Asian teams was 1999 at the William Jones Cup, and they were beating guys off the dribble. They were pretty quick, and we would come over to help rotate, and they'd beat us. They'd beat the help defense, and they'd be up sort of into their two-step layup. And so we're starting to wall up and challenge, and everybody sort of anticipating this layup, and they're kicking it out for another look at a three. We're in a long scramble closeout again, and they've penetrated and kicked it out to find an open shot, looking for that three ball. And it was the first time that I really sort of resonated with me. Just these guys had their way of playing, and how hard that was to adapt on the fly. And it's, you know, somewhat, you look at today's game, you look at the way that a lot of teams and a lot of concepts and how deadly that 3-point line is. Well, this was 20 years ago, and we're playing against sort of the Asian minnows at that stage, you know, Chinese Taipei, Korea at that stage, and just how they were fully prepared and fully bought into what they were doing. So for us, you know, that sort of, I guess, knowing who you are is key, because if we tried to be Australia, if we tried to play the same way we saw the game played in Australia, if we tried to play the same way we see, you know, the European teams play, for us, that wasn't going to be successful. You know, it was great basketball to watch. It was great skill and development, but it wasn't going to be successful for us on the world stage. So, you know, I think that's one of the huge takeaways in any team, is you don't have to try to be something that, you know, when you look across, maybe you look at an association that's very successful, you don't have to look at the way they're playing or copy their X's and O's. But it's really just trying to figure out who you are. And that's what I mean by our team identity. You know, we had a real strong belief in who we were. It's funny because I go back to 2001 where we beat Australia. That was the coach's name at the time. The coach of the team was Tab Baldwin, who was an American that had been in New Zealand for about 10 years prior to that. He actually coached a lot of us in the junior Tall Black teams growing up. He was very successful in the New Zealand NBL. That was his very first year, and he'd taken over from a coach that had been there for over a decade, Keith Meir, who was very, I guess, traditional with his teaching, very fundamental, and it was very successful for us as players in terms of development. But it didn't work for us on the international stage. We weren't able to get wins. We struggled against the sort of minnow teams. We had, you know, a good example was just pass and screen away, and if they switched, you had to roll that person down. But this was, for an example, like myself screening away, and I'm screening a 6'6" guy, and I'm supposed to roll him to the basket. You know, it just didn't make any sense. And I think what he had instilled in us, though, was a strong fundamental base, which you know, I'm 100% a huge believer in it. But once you get closer to the top, where winning is important, I think that's where you need to make the separation between, I guess, looking at being too fundamental or too conventional or too traditional, and looking to, I guess, tap into what your true strengths are. And for us, that meant that, a lot of actions were inverted. So when Tab Boardman took over the team, he put in the offense triangle, the triangle offense, which I think, some of you will probably be familiar with it. If you're watching the Last Dance at the moment with the Chicago Bulls and the Tex Winter offense of triangle, you'd see that how successful that they were with it, and how they found a way for Jordan to be able to play with his teammates in that offense. But we had the same offense. We didn't quite have Michael Jordan in there, but we were able to find different ways to counter traditional ways of defending. And it's probably the two biggest ones were we had guards posting up, point guards, shooting guards posting up, being the post targets. We had our centers and we had our big men out on the perimeter being the feeder. And that hadn't been done. Well, we hadn't seen it being done, but it made total perfect sense for us, because we had bigs on the opposition. What do they like to do? What does every big likes to do? They like to be close to the basket. That's their comfort zone. They like to be somewhere where they can grab a rebound. They like to be rim protectors. And we didn't have that size. We didn't have the ability to be able to break people down one-on-one off the dribble. So a lot of it required us to be right on top of our spacing, right on top of our timing. So we ended up with, at times, our 6'11" center entering the ball into me, into the post, not to go and score, but just to initiate the offense, and then try to find and capitalize on the opposition's, their comfort zone that they fall into naturally. I got some clips here too that I apologize for the quality of it. It was just a bit of a last little scramble today, trying to find some footage. So here's some 2002 footage. Can you see that, Lucas? You're good? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Mate. Yep.
So it's 2002, so it's very pixelated. I'm surprised it's not black and white, but it's just an example. And the guy with the ball right now is Piero Cameron, who is the current national coach of the Tall Blacks. He 6'6", 6'7", probably during this time, probably about 130, 140 kgs. And he's initiating the offense from the outside. Okay, so if I roll this, some people might know or heard of Kirk Penny, who played in the Australian NBL here for a few years, had a successful time with the Breakers. Great shooting guard. But what a lot of people didn't know was that he was actually a pretty handy post player as well. So you're looking at this right now. This is the point guard that's on the weak side, away from the ball. But if I just keep this plain, we just see some of the actions there. If I take that one back, this is Piero making a backdoor pass, a real easy play. You've probably seen that a lot, but what we haven't seen is probably the inversion of that action. You've probably seen it, many times having the guard out on front. I'll open up another one here. So once again, we've got our shooting guard that's ready to post up on the ball side. This is our 6'11" center that's got the ball on the perimeter. And Piero's making the flash. And we're looking for a high-low from a big to a guard. And I'll take that back again just to let you guys see. So we're putting guys in different spots all the time. This game here is actually against Puerto Rico, this is the 2002 World Cup. And that was the quarterfinal. I got one more I think here. Once again, playing off our big, run the guard into the post. We got some action, and who do we find? Piero wide open for a 3. Take that one back again. If you look at Piero's man, the big guy, he's stuck all the way in the paint, and the guard is just screened his own man. Once again, like I say, real simple play, not sort of Einstein type action, but I guess the point I wanted to make was that we were doing things that were really tapping into, I guess, a strength of ours. You know, our bigs shooting the ball from the perimeter, that was encouraged. And I think, you know, the game's come a long way since then, where now we see the bigs out making decisions and shooting the ball and making feeds from the outside. And, you know, now they talk about positionless basketball, but back 20 years ago, you know, we were sort of a little ahead. Well, I want to say a little ahead of the curve because we had to be. We had to tap into something that was unique. And I go back to the point of, if we decided to play the other way and have Piero, who was 6'7", posting up there 7-footers, yeah, sure, he could get a good shot, but we could get a better shot with his man, you know, being lazy off the ball and being able to capitalize on Piero's shooting ability. The same can be said, I think, you know, I've just linked up again with the Tall Blacks this year, and for next year as well, as we head into the Olympics, hopefully. And you know, the Tall Blacks, I guess, in this day and age, it looks very different. We've got some great athletes and certainly some athleticism there. And we're playing a totally different style, where we're playing an up-tempo, we're playing a 5-out, spread out. You know, we're still playing off our bigs being out on the outside on the perimeter, but we're opening up driving lanes for a lot of the guards. So, you know, but the pace of the game is sort of the key focus. And I guess one of the points, it goes back to the same point, is trying to make the opposition uncomfortable. So we still go here in the World Cup last year. I think the Tall Blacks were the second most efficient offense, the highest paced offense, and, you know, and had done a great job offensively of just putting a lot of hurt on the opposition. I think a lot of the comments that the guys were talking about was just lining up at the foul line alongside the bigs and the opposition bigs, and the bigs are sitting there as they're lining up at the free throw line, just talking to our guys and just saying, hey, can you guys just jog up and down a little bit just for a couple of possessions, you know, just give ourselves a breather. And that to us is the result that we're after. You know, it's one of those things in basketball, isn't it? Everybody's got their strategies in place, and as a coach, you're kind of sitting there, hopefully that, you know, it's like I call it an arm wrestle. You know, you're wrestling and trying to make your tactics, your strategies, and versus the opposition's personnel and versus their strategies, and who's the first one to give, you know, like, and so when we hear comments like that from the opposition, we're feeling good. We know we've got them. And, you know, that's something that we continue to tap into. If I go back to that 2002, 2001 and 2002 World Cup team, you know, the one that had the success of being fourth, I go back to, you know, some of those attributes that we looked for. A huge one for us was just IQ. And I go back to saying about how outsized we were, you know, across the board, about being outskilled. Like if we were to give people the ball to say, hey, you know, 5 seconds to go on the shot clock, go ahead and create us a score, that was going to be a turnover. We'd be better off, you know, drop kicking that thing into the stands. So at least then they're not getting an opportunity for a fast break off our turnover. So, you know, we had weaknesses there that, and sure, we turned it over, and anytime defense were able to do that, they got a score going the other way. But we played a certain style. We tapped into our strengths, and just the IQ of the team was super high, and we had to be. It was something that we didn't even have the experience on these guys. So even to the point of playing against the Yugoslavia team who had 6-7 guys in the NBA at that time, and probably their best player wasn't in the NBA or Botoroga. So we had one player that was an NBA player, Sean Marks, and by game 3 in that tournament he was out. So he was out with an injury to the eye, so he wasn't even playing anymore. So the experience that there was just no way we were supposed to be on the same floor as these guys, and so in order to be able to compete, we had to be on the same page. We had to be, as I say, a high IQ team, so we could make those little wrinkles, so we could go and find, I guess, tap into those strengths and really exploit the opposition's weaknesses. And I say that because I think every team, and I've heard it, like even with our South East Melbourne Phoenix team, we had a team that Simon Mitchell, the head coach, described a lot as a short, stocky, stubby team. And one of the things that we're going to look at trying to do is try to recruit some length going forward. But for me, I didn't see that as a negative. I just saw that as in like, okay, well, that's our limitations, but what are our strengths? What can we play towards? And I think that Tall Black experience has helped shape me to being that way, and to thinking that way every single time. So, surely we're going to be, we're not going to be throwing some alley-oops up to certain guys in our team, but sure, there's another way that we can go about getting 2 points or even 3. So I just had some notes here, so just sort of scrolling through. One of the, I guess, other areas where I think it relates to you guys is I talked about our, I guess, being a small country and just having an even smaller pool of talent. Like a lot of times in associations, if they get 10 players through the door, they're in the team. There's no trials. They're in the team. And that's, unless you go to the big associations in New Zealand and they have 2 or 3 teams that they're trialed out for. But for a lot of us, we came through these systems and we were able to make our top age group teams. And we were able to keep playing, I guess, from 12s, 14s, 16s, 18s, all the way to 20s. And a lot of us ended up linking back up with each other in the senior national team. Now, I think this is a good example of how a small talent pool or just being limited with your numbers actually can help you. Like we had the continuity of playing together for years, 10 years prior to all of us playing together in the national team. So, we had that cohesion, that chemistry, which we all know is so important in the game of basketball. We were able to play off each other instinctively. So although we had our offenses, one of those clips that I showed you where it was a back cut and it was a low pass from Piero to the back cutter. I mean, that was him throwing it to Dylan Boucher, who they played together the same offense for years prior to that point, and sometimes when you get to where you've got a lot of talent and guys are in and out all the time, you can struggle to find that chemistry. Another good example of that is this year we played Australia in February for the, I think it was the first FIBA window up in Brisbane. And Australia, to be fair, put together like their 3rd string team. It was, the NBA players were unavailable and it was only half the players available from the NBL because the other 4 teams were getting ready for the playoffs. We still didn't have we were missing some of our better players as well. But when we looked at the 2 matchups and we looked at the 2 lineups, the Boomers still had, I think, maybe 3 times as much experience as what our boys did in terms of the NBL, in terms of how many games they'd played, in terms of how many minutes they averaged throughout the season. So although they were a new team, we still obviously respect them greatly. But the one huge advantage that we had, even though we had missed out on some of our top players, was that the core of our group had been together. The core of our group was still there. And obviously we went on to win, but I think that it comes into making you super competitive no matter who you come up against. And both teams only had 2 days to prepare as well for that game. So real short notice. And I think even more so does that make it, more valuable of having that connection with each other. A few of our players talk about sort of, lack of talent, and looking at guys that some of our better players in the New Zealand black singlet over the years. I talked about Piero and his size and how he was still able to find a way to manipulate the game and find ways to contribute and to excel. And you look probably, a couple of guys of the names of so Dylan Boucher and Mika Vicona, who have sort of been staples of our New Zealand Tall Blacks program for years and very successful. Was this the way that they were able to impact the game without being scorers? I think it's well known now of the things that sort of someone like Mika Vicona can do and how much damage he can do on the court. But you go back years ago, I think a lot of guys like that were probably getting overlooked, not just with, I talk about those two, but probably in a lot of teams. And those type of players that can't shoot, or they're undersized, they're too small to play inside. They don't quite have the skill set to be able to fit into this particular mold. Well, I think those two, found a way, and they've revolutionized, I believe, an area of the game that's really strong in this part of the world, which is the dribble handoff. And those two they revolutionized that because they had the freedom to do whatever they want. Why? Because their opponents sat in the key. So they didn't play them because they were non-shooters. So they went and found the next best thing, which was let's go and free up my shooter, which is Kirk Penny or Phil Jones, two of the better shooters that we had. And they weren't just dropping the nice sort of pass here, handed on the tray. They were throwing it, between the legs and throwing it with the inside hand. And a lot of it's like exactly what Bogut does. How great he is at being able to pick guys off on the perimeter. And these guys were the first, well, I guess 2 of the finest that I've seen and had the pleasure of coaching and playing with, really sort of take a grasp of the game and turn a negative into a positive. So, I'd encourage you guys to, as coaches and as you're going and you're coaching talent, looking at talent, ideally we want that 6'10" center walking through the door. But if it's not, if they're 6'4" and 6'5" and they're a bit slow, find another way, because the beauty about basketball is that you can find multiple ways of playing the game and really tapping into it. And hopefully I've showed you some examples there of what we were able to do. Don't discard that player. And as I say, that small talent pool that we had, keep giving that player a chance to keep growing and growing. And eventually that player turned out pretty good and also had a great connection and chemistry with his teammates that we were all able to reap the rewards later on down the track. So, those were some of the points that I wanted to get across to you guys. Obviously, it's a lot different in the sense of you're in a development stage and development level, that you're coaching, and winning's important, but it's not the overriding. You're not going to lose your job if you don't win the national championship. I'm guessing, unless Lucas has some high expectations of you guys. But I just encourage you guys to just keep turning your kids, your athletes into the complete basketballers. Don't be short-sighted and thinking that winning this game on Friday is the most important thing. Like, go ahead, teach them the fundamentals, invert your offenses at times. Get your guys playing inside, get your big man making decisions from the outside, because I truly believe that that's the way the game's going. But I've certainly been a big believer in it, and I think our Tallbacks teams, who are very small and very I guess limited in terms of the depth that we have, but we have found a way to be able to make it competitive. So yeah.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. I've got a couple of questions coming through. So when you were doing, before we get to it, just so I understand what you're looking at, when you were doing that, what could you see? Could you just see me, or could you see?
I could just see you.
Okay, so...
And myself too, which I didn't really like. That was distracting more than anything.
That's fine. We'll get Adam, if you can unmute yourself and turn your camera on. Hopefully that lets Juddy see you and ask you a question. Yeah, so can you see Adam?
Yep. What's up,
you
Adam?
got me?
Yep, I got you loud and clear.
Yeah, yeah, good, mate. Great presentation. Loved it. Just with the All Blacks and your New Zealand netball team, they've had a lot of success, probably the most successful teams in world sport when you look at the championships they've won. The All Blacks were in a slump. They were saying sweep the sheds, which was back in the 80s or 90s. Have you used any of their concepts, either from the netball team or rugby team within your teams? It's just basically look after yourself sort of thing and clean up the place.
Yeah. No, the sweep the sheds was I think something that came out. It might have been in the book, the Legacy book. I'm not sure if you've read that one. And I think it was probably about 10 years ago. I think they had a rough time there where they won, I think, the first World Cup in '87, and then they'd gone all the way through to, I think, was it 2011 maybe, without winning. And the huge expectations that we have on our rugby teams, man. Like, even our prime minister says, I'd much rather be the prime minister of the country than the head coach of the All Blacks when they lose, because the pressure on that position is ruthless. But to get to your point, we did use the sweep the sheds, and I think it's become quite popular in amongst some sporting teams. I've heard that catchphrase being said a few times, and the success of the All Blacks is no doubt sort of put a popular spin on that. And so I think for us as New Zealanders, we are pretty quick to keep ourselves humble. Sometimes too much, but sweeping the sheds, I think, brings a great humility to your team. And it could be your star player, it could be your head coach, but everybody just looks after themselves, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty basic, isn't it? It's just like, hey, that tape you just left on the ground, just pick it up. If everybody does their bit, then there is no mess, And I think it's important to keep that humility going in today's, especially in the professional environment, where a lot of the world can be about money and figures and status. So yeah, we certainly used it, and it was good for us.
Good job. For everyone else's reference, I've recently read the book Legacy, and I actually do plan to send out, I guess, some brief dot points and a summation of some of that, and how I think some of that stuff could play into the way we behave and what we do at Southern Pen. So I'll share that with you. As you guys know, sometimes these little tasks or projects do take me a while to get to you, but it's coming at some stage. Another one from Andrew Hack. Hacky, can you turn your camera on and your audio on and ask away?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for your time. It's great to hear what your insights into the game. What my big question is, we obviously do planning with all our players, and I imagine it's a lot more with your team. How much do you discuss with the players about, being the underdog card, and do you do you sometimes not tell them everything and coach it, or do you are you really open with what you're planning with your team? I'm not sure if that makes sense what I'm trying to say, but
Yeah, I'll answer the underdog one. I think is I tried to sort of paint a picture at the start. Like we have, it's pretty easy for us to label ourselves that if it hasn't been labeled, if we haven't been labeled already. And I think, obviously we're a smaller country and used to punching, above our weight. So I think we've been brought up sort of with a lot of that. And, I guess one of the things though is it's different from when I was growing up to what it is now. So when I'd grown up, like I said, I think New Zealand had been Australia once on the tip-in. And never had they even come close in the junior ranks or circles. But in this day and age, like we're actually very competitive with Australia. And some of their junior teams have actually tipped over the Australians in some of those qualifications. And that's been in the last sort of decade. So to answer that one, it's a real easy label for us to take. We enjoy it. We actually don't probably respond so well when we're actually the expected favourites. So it's probably unfamiliar territory for us. But yeah, and in terms of I guess, sharing everything that, I'm not sure, were you meaning about sort of the game plan, or was it, what was that in reference to, Andrew?
So it was more like in reference to if you want your players, like, so with like there's specific roles in the team, do players know what their roles are, as opposed to do you just tell them what you want them to do and they just respond to that? Or is it very open conversation to say that you will be just a screen and roller in this game, as opposed to just telling them that's what they have to do? Or is it?
Yeah, I think that the best teacher of it all has actually been on the court. And sure, that 2002 team had a great understanding of who we were. Like I said, it was, if we had somebody who had wanted to create the own shot, we just didn't have that personnel in the team. And so we had to play to our strengths. If we deviated just even just an inch from what we were good at, it quickly turned to custard for us. We were a good oiled team, but we had definite weaknesses as well. And sometimes I feel like, like a lot of teams still trying to be something, and they're going through, and I'm talking about the professional team, because I think development teams should be still trying to go through those learnings, because that's the best time for the youngsters to actually experiment and to go through those stages. But in the professional era, if I see a team that's still trying to be, I guess, in that development stage, and putting people in positions where they're uncomfortable, I see that that's going to lead them down a road where they're not going to be so successful. And that's because, when I say successful, it's like the wins. Maybe in a few years' time, that player will get there eventually, and we've certainly gone down that road a few times. We had Alex Pledger, who I'm not sure, he's our 7-footer that plays for Melbourne United. Him in a dribble handoff, it's scary. He would wipe out Kirk Penny on the handoff on the screen as opposed to the defender. So he would dribble and have the head down. So we quickly took that away from him, and he became a pass and screen guy. But I guess for us, that was a great teacher in itself. And we just keep preaching, look, in order for us to be successful, we had to play this way. We needed you to be great at this role. And that was the difference between certain individuals making the team and certain individuals not being cut. And sometimes there were great individuals that were cut because maybe they weren't great at the particular things that the team was looking for. So, yep, it's always an evaluation for us. We need to, because we're just limited with the resources that we have. We don't have the luxury of, our two NBA guys that we've had, Sean Marks, who's now the GM for Brooklyn Nets, 6'11", played for us for a few tournaments, but was unavailable a lot. So we had to survive without having our 6'11" athlete, the guy that you could just throw a lob to. That's probably the perfect thing for any guard to be able to drive and just throw it up in the air. And at the moment, we have Steve Adams in the NBA, and he hasn't played any games for New Zealand. He's played 0. And we don't have any other Steve Adams, although he's got 16 siblings or whatever it is. But, it's just, we just don't have the luxury of having the next guy come in. So we have to be particular, we have to be specific. And if players deviate from that, then you have to have that hard conversation with them, or that open conversation. But I think sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's just seeing it on the floor and seeing them be successful or not. And that's the best teacher of them all.
Love it. Next question is from Joe, who you spoke to at the start. But Joe, if you want to unmute yourself and fire away.
Yeah, thanks, Judd. You talked a lot about the importance of connections and chemistry within the team. I'm just curious how you're currently keeping in touch with your athletes during the shutdown, and kind of what are the important parts of maintaining that connection and those connections and chemistry now during these times?
Yeah, good question. That's really, I think, technology really helps this day and age. I think, obviously we can do a lot on our phone with not just calling them, but with our team chats on WhatsApp. A lot of it is actually probably taking the piss out of each other, but we still count that as just touching base with everybody. Obviously, there's a huge group. There's a staff, I guess, with our 12 Black program. So we have a high performance manager, team doctor, physio, all that, and so they're all on top of, I guess, their specific area. Much is the same as how it's done in the Phoenix right now as well. Obviously, we'd love to be able to get to these guys, every day and work them out. But right now, it's really just keeping in touch with them. And for me, as coaches, I guess that's important too. There may not be anything specific to talk to them about in terms of, skills or teams that we're coming up to play against. But yeah, just keeping in touch, and I think that's important. Just from the personal side, letting them know that they're more than just a player. Not just a hunk of meat out there, that you're actually taking an interest in caring for them. I think that's important with anybody. But the beauty about the New Zealand group was we had all sort of grown up together. So keeping in touch was just a regular thing like we would do anyway. Piero, who I talked about being the current coach, well, me and him were sort of best friends growing up in a small town in New Zealand. Actually, a lot of those guys that we played together, we actually sort of carried on and still coaching together as well. So once again, that's the beauty about growing up in a small place, playing together. I think the connections and bonds are there, and probably lifelong relationships. So easy on that front. With the Phoenix one, it's it's interesting at this stage, because we've got a couple of guys in the States, some guys in Melbourne, and everybody just wants to get out and play and bounce a ball. But it is what it is right now.
Brilliant. Scott Ramsey's got a question. Scott, do you want to fire away, mate?
See if I can put my head on the screen. There we go. Hey, Judd.
Hello, Scott.
Thanks for your time, mate. Appreciate it.
All good.
I was really interested. You were talking about, I love the fact that Lucas has been able to make Southern Penn look like a small nation. That's terrific. You talked about...
He wants the haka. He wants you guys to implement a haka now. That's
next week's chat. Man, there'd be some hamstrings pulled there, I reckon. I was really interested to get a feel for what New Zealand basketball values in skill sets outside of, you know, the bright and shiny stuff. So like, you know, it's really easy to pick the tall kid. It's really easy to pick the quick kid. It's really easy to pick a good shooter. And you were talking about the limitations that New Zealand basketball had at that level. I was just really interested to get a feel from you as to, okay, well, what skill sets did New Zealand basketball really value when sort of pulling these teams together?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of it was based around, okay, tapping into the strengths that we had. So the IQ, I guess, and decision making go hand in hand. And for a lot of us, you know, as the saying goes, we spend 10% of the game with the ball in their hand, 90% with the ball, without the ball. So for a lot of us, we became guys that had to be on point with our screening. And that was even me, from the post, being a post-up guy, to turning around now, flipping a screen for Pero to pop out, you know, our 7-footer or our centre to pop out for a three. So a lot of it was based around what you did off the ball. We taught, I think defense was a natural thing for us to be able to aspire to, or to try to, it was just in our nature, I think, much like the Australians, you know, very nuggety and gritty teams. Yep. I think it's just a natural affiliation for our countries. So that was never a question. And I think that's what gave us a huge, even though we're undersized a lot, you know, the undersized guy is always going to get away with a lot more, you know, I mean, so we played to that. In terms of the offensive side, you know, outside of the spacing and timing, there was a huge focus on just looking after the ball. And that meant, you know, real basic fundamentals, the passing, the leads, everything you could think of that would make the offense, like the triangle, work. In that offense that I showed you, those 3 clips, like how many times was the ball dribbled in those clips? Like it was all based upon 5 guys being in the right spots, and the cut and the timing and the execution of the pass. So, you know, huge emphasis was on that. Unless it got down to 4 seconds in the shot clock and somebody had to throw up something and make a move, but that just wasn't us. So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question. It was kind of where I was kind of alluding to as well about Keith Mayer, the first coach that had been there. He had given us a lot of those fundamentals. And I think Tab, who was the successor, sort of really came in at the right time, had a great game plan, but really leveraged off a lot of the fundamentals that had been developed in the years previous.
Terrific. Thanks, mate.
Awesome. Judd, I've got one final question from myself, but I think this will help a lot of our coaches. You spoke about how, you know, often through junior ranks in New Zealand with association level stuff, it's if you turn up, you're going to get picked because there's lack of people try it, let alone lack of talent. How was the accountability managed at those younger ages then? Obviously, either when you were an athlete coming through as a coach at that level, because I'm assuming there was some sort of fear that, well, we've only had 9 kids turn up. If 2 of them quit, well, we don't have a team. And at stages, sometimes we face similar challenges where we may have teams of 8, and if 1 kid quits and we're down to 7 and another couple are sick, like we can't play. So how's the accountability managed with the lack of numbers in the team?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I wasn't with with an association in terms of when I was coaching, but I was with their Breakers Academy, and we would cherry pick, I guess, a lot from the different associations in Auckland and take the best athletes from each of those associations. The ones that we had sort of targeted as the prospects going forward. And I remember, you know, some of them needed to have that outside experience to open their eyes up of what life was all about. It wasn't just about that little association and that little team where you were the big fish in the small pond, and we have so much of that in New Zealand. You know, you're isolated firstly as an island country that's at the bottom of the world. and we only just recently been able to get these international experiences for junior teams. So, one of my biggest challenges as a coach was just opening their eyes up to saying, hey, now if I put all of you best athletes together, now this is what competition is, and this is what we're talking about in terms of the levels you need to be, and that would develop, I think, things like discipline. Then we were able to showcase, or for them to experience, I guess, the breakers club, because they would come underneath with the academy, and they would experience, I guess, and see firsthand the players practicing, being just up close and personal. We were able to obviously leverage off some of the players that we thought were great role models, because sometimes as a coach, there's enough, sometimes they just have had enough of hearing your voice. So, they want to be a player. They want to be a breakers player. They want to be a tall black. So sit them down with that person to have that little chat. And sometimes that's just enough to get the penny to drop. And, that's, it could be exactly the same message that you've been saying for years to this player. But sometimes, just resonates a little different. And I think when they're able to do that, and we were certainly able to do that, I think that worked a lot. But geez, I tell you what, over my years, there's a lot of guys that I just, would do your head and you'd wear out, and I got to the stage where I was just like, I was more interested in the ones that were going to be there and the ones that were actually feeding off and reciprocating the same energy that I was invested into them too. So I would say if you're losing some of those people, I mean, if the messages haven't worked, try another tack, try another person, try another, if you've got a player in that area, someone that, you can get them to a game, get them to a Phoenix practice or an environment, or, that might be just enough to open their eyes.
Sure, love it. Well, those last questions, thank you very much. I think that everyone agrees they were good questions, and certainly added some more insight into the whole David versus Goliath battle. Judd, yourself, thank you very much for sharing the story. I know myself, even though I've had some of these conversations with you, I've still managed to go and get 2 or 3 pages of notes. So I'm sure that others have been able to manage to get very similar.
Yeah, nice.
So
nice.
There's a lot in there that can definitely help us as coaches and association. So now it's up to us to, I guess, go and put some of that into place when we finally get a chance.
Yeah, and I'd just say, like, geez, I think, like I said at the start, pick out the pieces that are relevant, throw out the other pieces, and there ain't no magic formula in there, but you'll learn a lot through your experiences and leverage off that. But certainly keep finding coaches and different people that have had these experiences has been great, regardless of which country they come from, because they all have invaluable experiences. One of my favorite international teams to watch and learn off is Korea, of all teams. So just because of the way they do things and that I think could be relevant for New Zealand. It's a great game, and hopefully you've managed to take 1 or 2 things.
Awesome. Well, for everyone else, I have recorded this session, so when I have a chance to work out how recording stuff with Zoom works, I've never done that before, I'll find a way to share it with you all so you can look back or go through your notes, or you might have written down a note and want to just check back on something that we'd spoken about. So that will come to you far quicker than my report on the legacy comes to you, but it will come to you at some stage in the next day or 2. So once again, Judd, thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who did jump on. And I'll speak to you / see you all very soon.
Thanks people.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Judd.
All good. See ya.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Judd.